Hello Year 8s, welcome to this video. This is our first video in our algebra topic. In this one we're going to look at notation, so how do we actually write some of the terms in algebra, in the algebra unit, and that will be a revision of what you covered in Year 7. And then in this video we're going to review substitution. Again, you did that in Year 7, but this time, now that we're in Year 8 and we've learnt a little bit more about negative numbers, some of the substitution will involve negatives. So if I get started straight away, I'm going to take you through just the notation to begin with. Now again, you're going to be jotting down some of these examples in your summary book, and so as you can see, I've done a nice heading for you, notation and substitution, which covers today's lesson. First of all, in terms of notation with multiplication, when we're using a pronumeral to represent a number, sometimes you'll come across an example, sorry, I'll just make that a little bit smaller. Sometimes you might come across an example where we're multiplying a number by a number that we don't know. So say that number is x. And so we would normally write that as 5 times x. But in algebra, we like to simplify as much as possible, and so we write that as 5x. Likewise, if you had something like 3 times y, we wouldn't write 3 times y, we would write 3y. And so you see that the multiplication symbol actually gets left out when we are working in algebra. Now, in division, very similar, say you had 5 divided by x, we would write that not with the division symbol, but with a fraction like this, 5 over x. Or if you had something like, if I use y divided by 4, that would equate to y over 4, like so. So we tend not to use the division symbol either in algebra. With powers, we simplify, so if you have something like x times x, of course that is going to be x squared, and our work with the index laws last term might remind you of something like this, y times y times y times y. We collect them together to make y to the power 4. So that's just, I guess, the key ones that that I wanted to mention. Just finally, there's these ones here. If we've got a number, any number raised to the power of 1, that's just the same as that number on its own. So we don't tend to write to a power of 1. Likewise, if you've got something like 0 plus x, well, that 0 there just cancels out. It's like saying we're adding nothing to the x, so what we're left with is x. Finally, this one here, this is saying 1 times x, so one group of x, which again is just x. So I wanted to touch on those just in case you do come across this, or you might come across x and be considering, oh, what's the number in front of that? How many x's do I actually have? And so a lot of you will probably put a 1 in front of it. It's not wrong, it's just not something that we generally write. So you need to be used to seeing it without the 1 and know that there is, I guess, an invisible 1 that's sitting there in front of the x. What I want to do now is just take you through some examples of substitution, so something you did cover last year. So just as a reminder, when we substitute, we give value to the letter that we have. So we'll be told what letter to use, and you'll see in this first example, I've got for x equals 2, find the value of these expressions. So I'm going to start off here with just x minus 5. So if x is 2, that means I've got 2 minus 5, and that gives me negative 3. So you'll see we'll get some review of our negative numbers in this unit, which will be good. Part B, so again, for x is 2, I'm going to substitute 2, and what you'll notice is often when we are multiplying by a number, we can place it in a bracket like I've done here. And that's going to be particularly handy when we're working with negative numbers. So this means 3 groups of 2, so we've got 6, and we're taking away 4 from that. We're left with 2. Over here, again, x squared, well, x is 2, so I'm going to find 2 squared. And 2 squared is 2 times 2, which is 4. This time, I've got a negative out the front of my x squared. So what this means is I need to first find that power, so so 2 squared, which is 4. But since it's got a negative out the front, it means I need to have that negative out the front of that power. So negative 4 will be my solution. Just down here, I wanted to show you a couple where we're substituting a negative value. This time I've made x equal to negative 2. So I'll substitute that into this. And now I have negative 2 take away 5. That gives me negative 7. Over here I've got 3 times negative 2. And then I'm taking away 4. So I'll first do that multiplication. 3 by negative 2 will give me negative 6. And then I'm taking away 4 from that. That's going to give me negative 10. And just finally, this one here, you see I've got a bracket. So I need to do 3 times negative 2 in the bracket first. Then I need to square it. So we'll break it down. 3 by negative 2. And then I need to square it. So 3 2s are 6, but 3 by negative 2 is negative 6. Notice how that's inside the bracket. Now that that is squared, it's saying square that entire number, which means that that's negative 6 times by negative 6. Negative times a negative gives me a positive, and 6 6s are 36, so I get positive 36. That's different to the one above, because the one above, just over here, the negative here was not inside a bracket, so the squared part was actually only squaring what was x, not the negative that was sitting out the front. Again, just pause where you need to if you are jotting down these examples. Now, last one. This time we've got two different pronumerals. So I've got x and y. X is negative 1 and y is negative 2. So we'll have a look at some examples of substitution where we've got two things. The first one's just using x, as we can see, negative 2 times x. So what I'm going to do is now write 2 times x inside that bracket, since that's what I was given to begin with. So 2 times negative 1, since that's what x is. Now notice I write that negative because I haven't, that's still there, I haven't actually dealt with it yet. So I write it to begin with, and at the moment all I'm doing is looking at what's inside this bracket. 2 times negative 1, which is negative 2. Now we're not finished yet because we've got a negative and another negative inside the bracket. So it's saying basically the opposite of negative 2. The opposite of negative 2 is positive 2. Some of you look at it and you go, a negative and a negative makes a positive. That's another way that you can look at it, and that works as well. Part 2, we've got negative, but then x times y. So negative, then I've got x, which is negative 1, and then I've got y, which is negative 2. Notice I'm putting it in brackets here just to make sure I don't lose any negatives. I've actually got 3 of them here. So first of all, maybe we'll multiply these two together. So when we multiply these two together, 1 by 2 is 2, negative times a negative is a positive. So that part there is equal to positive 2, but notice that there's a negative out the front, so that carries down to the next line as well. So the solution to this one will be negative 2. Okay, nearly there. We've got negative 1 for x and negative 2 for y. So this is telling me I need to do 2 times negative 1 plus 3 times negative 2. Always multiply before you add, so we'll multiply these two together. 2 by negative 1 is negative 2, and 3 by negative 2 is negative 6. Now we've got negative 2 plus negative 6. I'm adding a negative. When we add negatives, that's the same as going to the left on the number line. It's the same as subtracting. So now I'm left with negative 2 take away 6, and I get negative 8. And the last one, we've got x over y, or x divided by y. So that means I've got negative 1, since that was x, over negative 2, and that was y. A negative divided by a negative gives us a positive. So to simplify, I just need to make sure that if I have a negative on the top and on the bottom, that my final solution is a positive result. And so I get positive a half. As you can see, our negative numbers, we're going to be practicing them a lot more in this unit, just like we did at the beginning of the year, but now we're doing that through substitution. So in class, we're going to have a bit more of a practice with this. Will be a good opportunity as well if we need to review some of our rules regarding negatives.